reference to yourself. You can do it. Your situations have no business controlling you. Your cousin who you hang with all the time has no control over you unless you give him or her control. And if you have a problem with what he or she says about you, cut them off. It's more than him or her. It's some good folk. Why folk like to hang with folk that put them down or keep a whole lot of foolishness going? You ever wondered about that? Especially women. Women be like, well, he always got something negative to say. Well, why do you listen? You got the phone. Why do you keep listening? You don't know how to just take the phone. Listen, it's real easy. Pretend this is a phone right here. What you say now? I'm what? Oh, so you don't like me? Oh, so you think I'm that? Oh, I want you to listen now. Are you listening? You listening real good? Okay. Rap back. And slam it. You don't have to take that. Because some folks will sit around the house thinking about what a pessimistic person said to them. Will sit around the house all day thinking about what that person said, as if they have no control over it. But again, when you see this verse, do you have control? Let's go a little further. 1 Corinthians, which is the next book over from Romans. 1 Corinthians, 4th chapter, verse 6. Notice the Apostle Paul states, now these things, brethren, I have figuratively transferred to myself and Apollos for your sakes. Now listen to the wording. That you may learn in us not to think beyond what is written. Does that suggest that you can't control your thinking? It may be a learning process, but can you control your thinking? Look at what he says again, that you may learn in us not to think beyond what is written, that none of you may be puffed up on behalf of one against the other. I can control what I think in reference to people or situations when you consider this verse. I have to learn to do it, but I can do it. It may take some time, but I can do it. Look at someone and tell him or her, I can learn to think properly. Look at somebody else and say, it may take some time, but I know I can learn to think correctly. I can learn it. I can learn it. I ain't always got to think this way. I can change. I have the ability. How many see it? Can we go further? 1 Peter, the 4th chapter. 1 Peter 4 and 12. Beloved of saints, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you. Look at your neighbor and say, no matter how rough it gets, you still can control your thinking. I don't care if all hell breaks loose, you still can't control your thinking. I don't care if everything that can go wrong goes wrong. When you consider this verse, you can control your thinking. How many gonna help me read this verse? Ready? Read. Wait a minute. We got to read it right. How many gonna help me read this verse right? Read it with some authority. Beloved. He says, I have the ability, basically that I have the ability to think, even in a horrendous situation. It's rough, and the situation is trying to control my mind, but it's not going to happen. How many know a fiery trial is something that's, what's your word for it? Somebody said rough. Somebody else said tough. What else? You got to say it a little loud. Now I'm way up here. Frustrating, challenging, horrendous. But look at the verse again. You don't have to think strange. You don't have to start complaining just because it's rough. You may cry, but that does not mean you have to start doubting. Because see, how you're thinking will eventually come out of your mouth. Bible says it another way. It says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. But of course, in part, the heart represents the mind or our thinking. So if you get to saying that which is contrary to the will of God, that means your thinking is off track, or you're thinking strange. And here we are told not to think strange. It's happening, but I'm going to keep my mind in the place it needs to be. I can't pretend and say this is not happening. Yes, it is. It's happening, girl. Yeah, brother, it's happening. He did you wrong, and you're real mad about it. Yeah, it happened. Yep, he walked out on you. It happened. You can't deny. You know, some folks, well, I ain't going to receive it. No, you got to receive it. It's reality. It happened. I am not receiving that in the, you can not receive it in the name of Jesus all you want. But it has happened. Trouble happens. Trials happen. Folk will do you wrong. Folk will stab you in the back. Tell your neighbor stuff happens that affect your mind. But you can't control it. But oftentimes we allow the situation, especially if it's a rough situation, to control us. But the verse tells us that we don't have to allow that to happen. How many gonna change and line up with what the writer is saying here? Let me see by a show of hands. Is it gonna take some?